Hi, I'm Brian Dunn, and welcome to the most important podcast ever. What makes it so important? It's not about me, it's about you. This podcast is about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, the moments of resilience, the lessons learned, and the small acts that make a big difference. From retail floors to boardrooms, we'll share the untold stories that shape lives and careers. This week, our guest is Reverend Dan Renfro, and I am so excited about this episode. I got to tell you a quick story to set up. Uh, I knew Dan from our time together in Ohio, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit. But my wife died in 2016, and sleep became something of a distant relationship for me. I went through a long time, and I would get up when I couldn't sleep, and I'd scroll through Facebook or my social media. And one day, what did I come across but a familiar face and an old friend preaching the good word? And that was the Reverend Dan Renfro. And it just, you have no idea, like so oftentimes it happens, those words found me at the exact right moment. So I am thrilled to have you with me today, Dan, and I'd love if you would introduce yourself to our audience.
I love that story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it has been said that my sermons are the best cure for insomnia there is. They'll put you to sleep in under 5 minutes. So just keep that in mind. Maybe we can package that. So I am Dan Renfro, and I know Brian for many, over 20 years now. So, I mean, it goes way, way back. Um, just a little bit about me. I'm almost 70 years old, and I've told my story so many times in different places, testimonies for church and in the recovery community, which is where I come from, and I hope we can spend some time there today. But my greatest accomplishments, Brian, are my family, and so I just tell you a little bit about to introduce me, tell you a little bit about my family. I've been married 50 years. This year in August, my wife's name is Nita. We've got four great kids. Let's make sure I get see, sometimes I forget one or add one, so I just want to make sure. We have four kids. My son, he just recently retired after 22 years in the Air Force. He went and he joined the Air Force when I was at Best Buy, and so that was an interesting time. His wife's name's Jen, and he gave us our first granddaughter. Her name's Cheyenne. My oldest daughter, she and her beau, his name is Brian. They are having their first child together. She wasn't going to have children, and then a few months ago, she said, "We're going to have a child." And I have all girl grandchildren, and we found out that it's going to be a boy. Now, here's a cool, fun fact. His initials will be, and this is true, I'm not making this up. I may make up a bunch of stuff as we go on, but I'm not making this. His initials are BJD. That is real. His name's going to be Brian after the grandfather on that side and his father. James after me. My real name is James Daniel, and of course their name is David. So Brian James Davis. So that's exciting. Just in a couple weeks. Then there's Heather. She's married to Victor. They have three daughters. Belle, Zoe, and Marie. And you see me looking over here because I had to write this down because I knew I'd forget somebody. And then Anna, my youngest, she's married to Bruce, and she just had a baby a couple years ago, and her name is Mila. And I had up here, but he got bored as we were trying to set up. Is the only baby still left at home is my little long-haired Chihuahua, about 8 years old, and his name is TJ. And so that's kind of about me in a nutshell.
That's awesome. 50 years in a row, same lady. Outstanding. That's what a blessing for sure. So maybe Dan, you could just take us on your journey. I uh, I picked up the journey in Ohio when we worked together. I don't know anything about what was before, and I found you years later. I will say, I will start with just one thing. One of my, and Dan and I talked earlier this week, one of my most powerful memories of Dan was standing in the parking lot of a Best Buy store in Tri County in Cincinnati, Ohio. And this overwhelming, powerful smell from the hot dog factory next door. Uh, is that an Oscar Mayer? Was it Oscar Mayer?
It's a Kroger's meat plant, and they
Well,
they do the meat for all the Krogers.
I don't know if you've noticed this, but my memory plays tricks on me sometimes. And when I tell the story, it's always Oscar Mayer. But
Maybe they make for Oscar Mayer.
there you go. Because Oscar Mayer seems funnier to me than
Yeah.
Kroger. But so please, Dan, just sort of walk us through your story, and I'll jump in with questions. Okay?
All right, great. Well, so Brian, that's interesting. That's a great place to kind of start. And is you came to that parking lot, and I don't need to tell that story real quickly. I was newly, and people that I work with, probably except for some people real close to me, did not know that when I came to Best Buy, I was in recovery and new to recovery, only about 5 years. A lot of people think that 5 years is a long time to be in recovery, but for a drug addict and an alcoholic, especially in my case, because it was a lifelong thing, is you forget how to live. And they say that your emotional development stops when your addiction first kicks in. And mine kicked in when I was about 11 or 12. In fact, I started getting high when I was about 12. So my life, even though I lived with a lot of different people, it's kind of an orphan. And over the years, a lot of things happen, and maybe I can touch on that. But one of the things that happened, even though the one couple, my cousins, who really really loved me and was really trying to teach me how to be a person, whatever, they kind of got me too late. My birth father used to beat me and was a victim of abuse. And if you know anything about abuse in anyone, it causes traumas in their life that are lifelong. We heal and we learn how to live, but even though we heal, some of those traumas are still there. And so your development is retarded. You don't, it's, I say that sometimes, and then people think that I'm saying that politically incorrect, but I'm using the exact meaning of the word. It quits going forward. And so the reason I bring that up at this point is that I didn't know how to deal with things. And one of the reasons, I was in addiction because I was using it to replace all kinds of things in my life, mostly emotions. But 5 years sober, I have, instead of when I got mad, grabbing a bat and hit somebody in the head or go blow their car up and stuff. And I'm not exaggerating. I was trying to learn how to live and how to do the right things. And so I had some role models um, or was trying to really, really have some role models. This was a new to me, when I got to Best Buy. And there was a couple people. You weren't, I don't think, the regional there, but you were such a big, powerful presence. And I watched what you did. And let me back up. I listened to what you said, but then I watched what you did, because so many people in my life had said one thing but did other things. Said they loved me, but threw me on the side of the road. Or my father tried to kill me multiple times. And so I watched what people did. And so anyway, watch what you did. And you always, even if it was what sometimes we thought was crazy, if you said it, you did it. You stayed to that. And so you kind of became a role model for me in how to be how to interact, how to have relations, how to be a person. So and the pivotal moment for that was when I was gonna leave the company. There was a lot of arguments and things going on, and I don't even remember what they were exactly. But you came from Columbus to some measly little old sales manager in a store down in Cincinnati. In fact, we were on a conference call, you, me, and Rich, and you said, okay, don't make any decisions for the next 2 hours. And you drove and you came down your, and as your style, everybody knows you will remember this. Let's go out in the parking lot. And we had our conversation out there. So I just wanted to tell that as kind of a preface to where I'm going. I want to talk to people to let them know about two things that are prevalent that they don't know. See, a lot of people that work for me, work with me, for me, around me for 10 years, and nobody really knew except for maybe two, none of my managers, but about two people. Dwayne Borstaff, who actually brought me into the company. I worked for him somewhere else. And a guy named Herb Altmeyer, who worked for me and then worked with me and then wound up being a manager for us, knew that I had an addiction problem, and knew I was trying to be clean, and knew that they were around me enough to know that I was trying to not do some of the bad things I would had done. And so Dwayne also became a male role model for me. And you say, well, why did somebody that is 20, had been in the army for 10 years, why does somebody need this? And this is why, your broadcast goes out to so many people that are in business and that have people working for them, and they hear of addiction, but I don't think they understand. I grew up in a broken home. I grew up, back in the old days when somebody got divorced, that they were outcasts. My mom tried to keep us, but she couldn't. And I wound up living in a lot of different places with a lot of unscrupulous people that did a lot of bad things and really, really messed up my thinking. So by the time, and that all happened before I was even in first grade. By the time I was in second grade, I was pretty broken. And a lot of people tried to help me, but they didn't know what to do, and they got me too late. And just as a crude story, just so people understand how broken people are. Remember that people, kids that are broken, that or people, anybody that's in trauma, that their brain kind of stopped right then, and they don't learn things like you did. Here's I did not. Now this is actually a little crude, so I you might have to cut it out. But when I didn't know how to pee as an adult until I went in the army, and I couldn't understand what was all that's going on. I always had, we call tobacco stains, because I didn't understand that. And I never had a father to teach me. And then I was to an older point. Nobody ever showed me that. I didn't know that was a thing, and we couldn't YouTube how to pee. I know it sounds like a little thing, but we have to remember when we deal with people that are broken, that there's a lot of things that they're broken in their life, and that we have to interact with them differently. We don't have to cut them a break. We don't have to do a lot of things. Maybe we understand. When you first met me, and I worked with a lot of people, and like I said, I was about 5 years sober and had gone through a lot of different um, programs and counseling and a lot of different stuff. AA especially has a great sponsor. The first 9 years I stayed in AA before I moved into Christian recovery, and then wound up where I just retired from. But my point is that we have to relearn our lives, and even people that grew up in great homes. I've counseled hundreds and hundreds of people that grew up. They were rich and they had everything. They got addicted somehow, and they spent 7 years maybe on the street. Luckily, didn't nobody and die, but had forgot just simple manners, how to speak correctly, how not to have the F word as every adjective in your life. And when they go out and get in the working world and they get motivated to get back and try to do things, sometimes we need to spend a little time with them to kind of show them how to do that. And so when they tell the customer to park their effing car over there, they're not being rude or mean. That's just how they've been, so that we could pull them aside and have a conversation. So um, I just wanted to bring that piece up. I'm going to tell you my story. You say we're 20 minutes into this. How are you going to tell me? Um, I did come from a broken home. And when I was a child, my dad was an alcoholic and he was a drug addict, and he spent most of his time in jail. If you don't know Dayton very well, but if you did, there's a place, used to be a place that they finally tore down, called Parkside Home. And it was a project. So I grew up the first 6 years of my life in a project with my father. When he got out of jail, we got out of prison, he would come home. He was I've never told anybody this before, and anybody, even at my meetings. My dad was a crook. He was a criminal. He was a con guy. I learned two things from him. I learned how to be a chameleon. In other words, to be invisible when he was around, because if he would see me, he would beat me. And I learned the long con. And if you know about cons, there's a short con and a long con. The long con's the hard one. I learned that from him because I paid attention. He'd take me, use me as part of the things that he did. But the biggest thing I learned, though, like I said, I learned to be a chameleon. I learned how to blend in. I learned how to hide. Because if he saw me, especially when he was drunk, sooner or later he was going to beat me. He used to play this game where, and this is it's still sad to me when I think about it. Think about a 4-year-old kid. He would pick me up and he would throw me against the wall. And his friends like to play this game too. The object of the game was to bounce me off the wall and for me to land on the couch. And that's what he was being kind. But usually you bounce off the wall and you bounce off the couch. So he was very jealous of me, and he really did try to kill me a couple of times. My mom didn't believe me, but finally he got busted doing some of the things he did, and it got away from him. And I didn't live with anybody particular except for one set of people, a lady named Martha Jean Watkins. She was my cousin. I wound up adopting two of my sisters and got them out of that life. But I lived with a lot of different people. And I had another sister and brother that, and all of them have passed except for one by now. But my point is that other people's addictions, and I kind of jumping ahead here, other kind of people's addictions affect their children, but those broken things we have for our whole life. So anyway, I just catch you up real quick. So that happened. I went to live with a lot of people. This one lady, she used to tell me, no matter what happens to you, Danny, they call me Danny. You can call me Danny, but nobody else can. She said, and she was old now. She said, there's an old gray-haired lady praying for you. See, they would go to church, and I would go to church in some people's houses, but I never knew who Jesus was whatsoever. And probably some people watching now don't know who he is either, just have heard the name. But I had no clue until I was 33 who he was. So I lived in a lot of different places. I played the con even when I was a kid, but I was a victim. And another thing that people don't know, that people that are, especially young people that are abused, but certainly women that are abused, and anybody that has that before they find the escape or have a victim mentality. And somehow or another, we smell like a victim because wherever we go, wherever we're at, predators find us and they victimize us. And so that was kind of the story of my life. And that went on until something big happened in my life. And I used to go to school every day, and they would not let me go out on recess because they knew that the gang of boys would beat me up because I was the easy target. So I was probably in 4th or 5th grade. This is right before I met my wife. And then I did finally meet my wife in 5th grade. And in any case, to
Wow.
make a long story short, which is too late now, right? These guys would beat me up every day, and they wouldn't let me go out on the playground because they were protecting me. So they would always say, when it was recess time, they would say, "Hey, Danny, will you watch the boards, whatever?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, please," because I didn't want to get beat up. And they would let me out of school a few minutes early so I could run home because he just couldn't control. There's just a ton of guys beating me up. But one day, I wouldn't go to the restrooms at the same time everybody did, because I would come back with my hair would be wet because I put my head in the toilet. Again, if you're the 5th grade, you're kind of old for the swirlies and that stuff. But one day I went to the bathroom, and I was in the bathroom, and one of the bad guys somehow got out of the room and came in, and he proceeded to, oh, that was a big memory. Anyway, he came in, he pushed me, and for something snapped in me, and my dad had been being around him. He fought all the time. He was a big guy. And he knew how to fight. And plus, he spent a lot of time in prison. Like, wouldn't let me fight because he didn't want anybody to think know anything that was happening, that I had problems or stuff. But anyway, something snapped on me, and I went off. This guy's name was, I won't tell you his name, but I went off on him, and I beat this guy. I jumped. I was a little skinny kid. That was another thing. I was the littlest guy, so it was easy. But I jumped up and I wrapped myself around him, and I'm hitting him in the head. And because I ran home almost every day, and because I was always running and or on my bike, my legs were super strong. So I wrapped my legs around him. I locked my legs, and I'm just beating this guy to death. And finally, he gets me off of him, and he just can't. He's like, "What just happened?" He's freaked out. He's embarrassed because the little victim kid just whipped his butt. So I go back to the room. Of course, I'm a mess. I'm all tore up, and I sit down. And the teacher, she's like, "What happened? What happened?" Well, then this kid walks in, and he is messed up. She didn't say a word. She just told him, "Go to the nurse's office." She had a smile on her face, and nobody ever picked on me again. The problem with that is, it's a great victory story, but then I went from being the abuser and being bullied to then I bullied those guys. I never bullied anybody littler. I tried to take up for people, be Robin Hood, not because I was trying to do something good, but um, I just didn't want anybody ever to feel like I did again. But anytime I ran into those guys, anytime I got a chance, I found out that, just like Andy Griffin would say, that they bullies are only bullies if you let them be bullies. And all of that was to say, we whatever we accept, we'll continue to get. I don't know if you remember that saying, but that's something they taught at Best Buy later on. You get what you accept. And so I kind of learned from that. And that came part of my mantra. But
I,
then I just became a different kind. Before I was the lookout for the bad guys, and when people were robbing cars and that stuff. So I became I'm thinking about 13, but I'm not sure. But I stole my first car when I was 13, and so. It wasn't. It didn't really count, so to speak, because we stole somebody's car that I knew, and but I stole many cars after that. And I just became kind of a criminal. And by the time I was 16, I got arrested for robbing an apartment house, 62 counts of breaking and entering. It was in the daytime. The only thing that probably saved me, because if anybody would have been home, it would have been a different charge. So, but I was a master criminal. I was so smart, and let me just tell you, hopefully quickly. I was so smart. I was robbing this apartment building. All these people work for the same company, and one of the guys that lived there, his friend brought me there to spend a night because I was homeless from the time I forgot to tell you that I got thrown out of my home for doing drugs at 15 and became an emancipated youth. So I was homeless from the time I was 15 to 17. And so I made my living, and mostly I did my living to buy drugs. I just stole stuff to buy drugs. Anyway, all these guys worked on a construction crew, so they were gone 3 or 4 days a week. So these guys all left for their construction job, and I spent about 6 hours breaking into every apartment and going in and robbing the things I knew I could steal. The reason why I say I'm a master criminal is because I was smart. I borrowed a buddy's car and parked it behind in an alley. And there's this big building in the alley, which for some reason I didn't notice had thousands of windows in it. And inside those windows was hundreds of people watching me rob this house. Well, they thought that I was moving, but when the cops came, when these guys got home and reported this to the cops, they said, "Oh yeah." They said, "This kid, he's got hair down the middle of his back and long, whatever. I'm very distinctive looking. I think maybe you've seen that picture, but of course, they also, oh yeah, that he was spending. They knew the guys that knew that I stayed in their house knew who I was. They identified me, and I got arrested. Well, in between that time, these were some pretty bad dudes that I didn't know. I thought I was a bad. They were even better. And so these guys, I bought drugs from their friend. Their friend said, "Hey, the guy that robbed you's over here buying drugs." And they said, and this is a true story, kill him. And so they poisoned me, and they put Sometimes in acid and the different drugs, you put different chemicals in it. They filled it up with chemicals, and within 3 hours, I was in the hospital. This is not where they didn't have stuff to spray up your nose and you came out of it. I was in the hospital dying. They didn't know what. They knew I was poisoned. They couldn't. It was too late to pump my stomach, and so they tracked down my biological mom, which I hadn't lived with in years, but they found her and they brought her and they said, if you want to see him, you need to come now because he's not going to live through this. Uh, and so she showed up. I was on a table. They'd given me whatever they could give me, and I was screaming, just screaming because it's like a PCP type of thing. It took 3 cops and 2 ambulance drivers when they finally came to get me. I called the cops to come get me because I was tearing up cars and stuff. They couldn't get me in the ambulance. Finally, one of the cops hit me in the stomach when he knocked the air out of me. They pushed me in the back seat of the cruiser, and 2 of them sat on me until they could get me to the emergency room. In any case, I didn't die. My mom came and I didn't know she was there or whatever, but I kept screaming. They tell me that she told me shut up, and I did. And whatever worked through my body. By the next day, they give me some sodium pills, some stuff, and I lived. And they said you need to go to counseling. You can do all this stuff. And I also have these charges against me. I don't want the cops to find out because I know this is going to be bad for me. I told you I was a chameleon, and I learned from my dad the long con, and I talked my way out of that situation. And by the sometime into the next day, I was able to get out of the hospital. I promised to go home with my mom and go to rehab and do whatever halfway between wherever we were and wherever she lived. I asked her to pull over. When she did, I got out of the car and left. Cops finally found me. They took me back. By this time, I'm just getting ready to turn 17, and they're going to give me 7 to 15 years in prison, and because this is a bad thing that I did. And they also find out about the drug overdose, and they don't believe that these guys tried to kill me. They just think I took too much drugs, and so the judge says, uh, this is very funny. He said, Mr. Renfro, you need to find another profession. You're not a very good criminal. I'm crying. I thought it was a tough guy, but I know that what I'm facing, my lawyer's there, my caseworker for the state, everybody's there. And so I'm going to jail. And I got to go to big people's jail because I'm almost 17. And just to show me how bad that is, that night, the night before, when they brought me in, they let me stay in the they didn't put me in population, but they let me hear these guys screaming of what they were going to do to me. So the judge brought me in, he sits me in, and he says, um, I'm going to give you max. So, because he went back through my history, here I am by this time, almost 17 years old, and I have all these car thefts, all this stuff that they suspect me of. They had never been able to really press, but they had me on dead to rights on this. He said, I'm going to give you the max, and we'll see you when you're 30, basically. And then he said, I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal. And this is still Vietnam era. I don't know. Vietnam is just about to be over, but we don't know that. They're already starting to pull out. But anyway, he said, you can join the Army, and whatever the max initial enlistment is. And if you go in and you stay in, we'll hold the charges, and then if you stay in, we'll drop the charges. And so it took me, several seconds to go, I'll take door number 3.
Right.
And so I went in the Army, and I did 10 years in the Army. In the first 2 years, they taught me another lesson, how to close my mouth, because back in 70s, there was no HR or whatever. If you mouth off to your sergeant, he'd just knock the crap out of you.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I did 10 years in the Army, got married during that time. but I never quit doing. They didn't do drug tests and whatever, so I never really. I quit drinking, so everybody would think that that I was in recovery. But I did any kind of drug that, as long as I didn't have to shoot it, I did it. And then after about 6 years, I started drinking again. So I finally did get out of the army in 10 years, but I was still going crazy. Just to catch you on, I wasn't going to tell this whole piece.
Yeah.
Catch you up in 1991. I was out of the army. I almost got a divorce. When you said continuous time with my wife, we had almost got a divorce because I wouldn't quit selling drugs and doing all the things that I had done before. I just tried to do it smarter. I was always in fights and always just doing terrible stuff. One day I got hurt on the job, so I wasn't even working. I was just out doing terrible stuff. One day on my way home from something, I was driving home drunk, and I was so drunk that I passed out. I'm driving down 675, and I was driving about 70, 75 miles an hour, and I heard this noise, the gravel hitting the bottom of the car. And the reason why I heard it and didn't see it is I had passed out. And I was in the medium in between the 675, back just as you get off of 70. And I woke up and I heard this, and I looked out the left window, and I am literally I had a little truck driving up underneath a semi trailer. He's doing everything he can. Number one, not to kill me and to keep me from running into his truck. And so I jerked the wheel on my car, and then I passed back out. I wake back up, and we're deeper into the middle, and then I passed back out again. And then listen, I don't know how long it was, but then I woke up. I was on the side of the road in this truck, which was a manual transmission. It was in neutral. There was dust everywhere. Cars were still honking at me, and the truck was he just laid on his horn and just kept on going. And I had an epiphany. This was in 1990. I said, I think I might have a problem. Because before, everybody kept telling me you're a drug addict and you're an alcoholic. And I was like, so? It's not causing me any problem. My wife just leaving me, all this. And anyway, the next day I went to see my doctor, and I said, he'd been telling me forever, I want you to go to treatment. And I said, I think I have a problem. And they'd put me on Valium, and there's a new drug just come out called Xanax, and they'd put me on that. And I said, it's the drugs you gave me. I don't have an alcohol problem. It's the drugs you gave me. He said, whatever. So they put me in lockdown detox for 30 days. They didn't have treatment like they did. I came out. During that time, I went to an AA meeting. And during that AA meeting, I kept seeing on the wall this God thing, power. We talked about this the other day, power greater than yourself. And I'm like, what is this God thing everywhere? So I asked somebody, is this a God program? They go, oh, no, you can pick anybody you want. We're not a religious thing. And I was like, I see a lot of God in here. A guy in the army gave me a Bible. And so I read it in self-defense because people kept trying to tell me about God. And I'm like, I don't trust you God people. And I didn't trust them. So I started going to AA meetings, and AA, I saw God so much that my wife had been bugging me and my son at that point to go to church with them. Same church I got married in. And they'd asked me 300 and some times to go to church. And finally I went. And I knew that they were going to ask me for money, and I knew that they were going to be judgmental, and they weren't. Like finding the volume control here. They were nothing that I thought. I walked in, and I knew some of the people, and they all said hi. And the pastor guy, huge guy, was a lumberjack, Pastor Knowles, and he just came in. He gave me a big hug, and he wasn't even a hugger guy, they tell me, but he said, welcome. And he started putting me to work. The only thing that he knew about alcoholics is if you can keep them busy, if you can keep them busy, when put something in their hand, they can't put liquor in their hand. And so he kept bringing me in, and I kept going back to church, and nobody ever had a negative word. Not one, no one, not once. But I still had all those thoughts, easy living, rob. I'd rather rob than work. And one day the people who count the money were absent, and they said, "Dan, can you count the money?" Yeah, there is a God. And so they put me in this room with a couple $1,000s, and they said we usually have to be two people in here, but the both of them are sick. Will you count the money?
Oh boy.
Where's the $1,000? Is this can of camera? And so I had all this money on the table, and when I was sitting on the side of the road, I felt the presence of God. I just didn't know it was God because I didn't really know who Jesus was. I knew there was a God. I just knew that he was out. He was going to get me. As soon as I acknowledged him, he was going to blow me up. Well, anyway, in that room, I had another epiphany. I guess my word of the day that I didn't even want to steal the money, and they trusted me. My first thought, they're idiots. Second thought is, all that stuff they say about Jesus people it's real. And I'd been listening to what they were saying about Jesus, and I had started studying. And on it's funny that we're doing this in April. On April 1st, 1991, I accepted Jesus as my personal savior. And from that day on, Brian, I have not been drunk, and I have not been high since. I did steal two things in the next 10 years before I finally figured out what I was doing and understand it. But I started changing my life. By 1996, I think it was, maybe 94, I found Dwayne Forstock. I never got to meet his dad. I wish I did, but he's a kid, but he did what he said, and he just had principles. And so I worked for him, and I listened to him, and I tried to figure out how to rob the place that I was working, but I just kept thinking maybe this is a real thing. And this Jesus guy, man, I couldn't do it, but I'm doing it with his help. And of course, I was going to AA meetings. I had a sponsor, and I was looking at him. And then the place we worked closed down, and he went to Best Buy, and he called me. He said, "Hey, Dan, they got computers here." And I was working at Lowe's, and they had computers, but it was beside the lawnmowers. And so I came to work over there, and one of the things I didn't tell you, and I'm going to wind this up, but my dad always told me I was stupid, and I believed him. I have believed him all the way up. Um, it's always believed him. I thought every time I got anything and did anything right, that it was because I just knew how to be a con and be in the right place. And so I didn't get a good education. I didn't go to third grade at all because my mom tried to get us back and she tried to work. But I couldn't go to school because I had to stay home and watch the little kids. So I missed that whole year. Um, and when my dad would ask me, because he didn't want me to be dumb because that would reflect badly on him. And the reason why he used to beat me the most was because he would ask me a question like how to tell time or what's 2 and 2. Remember, I'm not even in first grade yet. And if I couldn't answer the question immediately, he would start. First he'd smack me, and then he would wear me out. And still at 70 years old today, I still have. If you ask me a question, I literally, what's your kid's name? If you ask me a direct question, it's hard for me to immediately answer. So it caused a problem in school. So I even thought I was even stupider. But come to find out once I got in the Army, I wasn't that dumb. I got passed, did really high scores on the test to get in. I was able to pick the job I wanted to do. I was able to become a dental hygienist in the Army. I got out of the Army. I got my degree in electronics. I loved that. I kept going to school because I found out I could learn. I kept going to school, and I went to Best Buy. I learned everything that I could there. I learned, paid attention. Everything I did from the time I accepted Jesus, I was successful for.
Dan, one of the things that's so powerful about your story for me, as I started this off, I talked about how I came across you early in the morning one day on Facebook, and I listened to you, and I wrote you a note while you were speaking, and you mentioned me. So then I went in and I started looking at your work on Facebook and other places, and I've been following you ever since. And one of the things that I think is so powerful, I haven't heard the depth of this story before, is you're so hopeful and joyful, and there's a light about you when you're talking about Jesus and you're talking about this to the people who are trying to find their way through it. And I just think the body of your work is so inspiring. I've gone back and looked at a number of the videos, and I really think, Dan, one of the things I hope you and I can do, I'd love to have you check in with us from time to time because I think you have a very powerful message. And the other thing I'm really drawn to by your story is very dramatic and traumatic. There are people we walk by every day who are hauling their backpack that is full of the shit that's been put on them. Last week, Karen was on and talked about how a coach told her she ran funny. She couldn't run. And 100 marathons later on 7 continents and 50 states, we have to be so careful about what baggage of our own we transfer on those we're trying to help. And I think we really have to be in tune with how we help people on their journeys. And I'll tell you, I found you, brother, refound you when I really needed it. I was down, man. And there you were. And I'll never forget that. And I get a little emotional thinking about it. And I have nothing but love in my heart for you. And I think I just sat and was quiet for longer than I ever have because your story is that powerful. And I'm just wondering, as we wind up here, what would you like people to take from your story? And I know we could fill hours, and
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I expect we will, but I'm just wondering, what would you like our audience to take from your story?
I've written this down somewhere, so I didn't not say it correctly.
Right
I made a
on.
little PowerPoint here to go through. Um, the reason I tell my story is not to say, "Hey, look, this is what I did," because I didn't do anything on my own. I tell people this story just for what you just said. Everybody's got something going on. Every person you meet, not just some people, every person. And many people are at that point in their life that they don't think they're going to make it. And what I want to tell the people is that um, we have made it through 100% of every problem we've ever had. I think I heard Zig Ziglar say that one time. We made it through every problem we've had up until now. We made it through. We made it through catastrophes and just horrendous things. And why was going on? We were like, I can't do it. I'm not going to make it. But we can make it through. It might be it was Jesus for me. It might be Buddha for you. It might be positive mental attitude. But there's something this universe provides this positive energy to grab a hold of. You've already proved it. If you the problem that you're going to have today or maybe tomorrow or whatever it is, whatever life throws at you, it's I'm not telling you this. It's not a motivational thing. I'm not making a penny if you listen to me or not. Here's what happens though. You proved it already to yourself that you have overcome every freaking obstacle in your life to this point. The odds are with you that you're going to beat this next thing, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
And if, like me, Jesus is your dude, then no matter what, even if you don't beat it in this world, you're going to beat it in the world, the everlasting world. So, and if you want to know more about that, I'd be glad to talk to you about anything, anytime. But my main things I like to talk about, especially since I'm retired now, is recovery and Jesus. So,
If there are people out there that would like to reach you, Dan, where's the best place for them to go?
so the thing to remember is that I'm deaf, or near deaf, so I don't hear well. So I don't do good on the phone, but I can make arrangements to talk to you in my car because I can turn you up. But to get a hold of me between then, if you go to my Facebook page is Dave J Dan Renfro, and it's very. If you type in J Dan Renfro, that's James Daniel. Um, it's going to come up.
Uh,
And in fact, if you just type it anywhere, you have my Instagram or any of that come up. If you private message me, or you can post it in a comment or whatever that you want to talk, I will get within 24 hours. I will get a hold of you.
Dan, I'm gonna link all your social media accounts as we publish this talk we've had today. And again, um, I really hope you'll come back because your story uh, is so moving and so powerful and so hopeful. And I guess the message I get from your story is that there's no day, no night so dark that there's not a morning to follow. And Jesus is my dude. But like you said, whatever your North Star is, believe it and know that there's goodness inside you. I have such admiration for your story, Rev. And I thank you for that early morning Facebook that found an old friend at the right moment. And we're going to have you back for sure.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate you. God bless you. God bless all you guys.
God bless you, Dan. Love you, brother. Um, and that's it for our longest episode, but a really excellent testimony from our friend, the Reverend Dan Renfro, the most important podcast ever. I thank Dan for his time today, and we will have all the links to how you can reach Dan. And remember, if you're out there and you're in a jam, reach out. There's goodness in you. There's goodness in all of us. And we'll link a couple of places where you can make that reach. So until then, be looking for all the powerful stories around you. And if you enjoyed this conversation or found this conversation powerful, please share it with somebody that it might help. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.